Rain fell softly over the small town of Brooksville that evening, tracing tiny rivers down the windows of the corner cafe where Officer Daniel Hayes sat nursing his third cup of black coffee. The air was heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and a creeping sense of exhaustion. It had been another long day of calls that went nowhere, petty thefts, domestic disputes, the usual rhythm of small-town policing. He was about to call it a night when the door opened, and a girl, no older than 13, walked in. She was drenched from the rain, her long brown hair plastered to her cheeks, her clothes too thin for the cold. She didn't speak at first, just stood near the doorway with wide, frightened eyes. The waitress looked at Daniel as if asking him to intervene. He stood slowly, his chair scraping the tile floor. "Hey there," he said softly, keeping his voice steady. "You okay?" The girl didn't answer. She just looked at him, trembling, then whispered, Are you the police?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, I am. My name's Officer Hayes. What's your name?" She hesitated, glancing back toward the street where rain blurred the world into watercolor streaks. Finally, she said, "Lila." "Hi, Lila, you lost. Do you need me to call someone?" She bit her lip, her hands tightening around the straps of a small backpack. Then she said something that Daniel would never forget. "Can you follow me home?" The words came out so faintly he almost missed them. There was fear in her voice, but also something else, an urgent pleading that chilled him. Daniel blinked. "Follow you home? Why? Is someone hurting you?" She didn't answer. Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head quickly. "Please," she whispered, "just follow me home. You'll understand." He studied her. Every instinct told him this was strange, dangerous even, but something in her eyes was undeniable. They were the kind of eyes that had seen too much too young. So he nodded. "Okay, Lila," he said quietly. "I'll follow you, but you stay close to me, all right?" She gave a small nod, then turned toward the rain-soaked street. Daniel dropped a few bills on the table and followed her out into the storm. Dash dash dash. The rain came down harder as they walked. Lila didn't say much, only glancing back from time to time to make sure he was still there. The streets grew darker, quieter, as they left the main town behind. Houses gave way to old farmland and broken fences. The only sound was the crunch of gravel beneath their shoes. After nearly 15 minutes, they reached a narrow dirt road that led into the woods. Daniel stopped. "Lila, where exactly are we going?" "Home," she said again, her voice flat, as if the word itself hurt to say. "Just a little farther." He sighed but followed. His radio crackled faintly, and he thought about calling in, but something told him not to, not yet. The road ended at a small, decrepit farmhouse that looked abandoned. The windows were boarded, the porch sagged, and the wind howled through broken panels. Daniel's flashlight cut across the yard, illuminating rusted toys, a torn bicycle, and a mailbox with the name Miller barely legible beneath the rust. "Is this your house, Lila?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes. Is anyone home?" Her eyes flicked to the upstairs window, where the curtain shifted slightly. "My mom," she whispered. Daniel's pulse quickened. "Is she okay?" Lila hesitated. "She's waiting." Something about the way she said it made his stomach twist. He motioned her to stay behind him and approached the door. It was slightly ajar, creaking with the wind. He pushed it open and called out, "Hello. Brooksville Police. Is anyone here?" No answer. He stepped inside. The air smelled of mildew and something faintly metallic, blood, maybe. The floorboards creaked under his boots. The walls were covered in old photographs, yellowed and curling at the edges. A young woman with chestnut hair smiled from nearly every one, sometimes holding a baby, sometimes standing in front of the very same house. "Mom." Lila's voice trembled behind him. Daniel turned his flashlight toward the staircase. "Stay here, Lila." He moved slowly up the stairs, each step groaning in protest. At the top, a door stood slightly open, and faint light flickered inside. He pushed it gently. The room beyond was small, a bedroom. The light came from a single candle on the dresser. And in the corner, on an old rocking chair, sat a woman. Daniel froze. She was still, pale, eyes closed. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, and a photo frame rested on her chest. The candlelight made her look almost peaceful. But the blue tinge to her lips told him otherwise. She had been dead for hours. He took a step closer, heart pounding. The photo in her hands was of Lila, younger, smiling wide. On the back of it, written in shaky handwriting, were the words, "I'm sorry. I love you, Lila." He whispered, "Don't come up here." But it was too late. She was already in the doorway, staring at her mother's body. Her small hands covered her mouth, and a soft, broken sound escaped her lips. "She said she'd wait," she murmured. "She promised." Daniel knelt beside her, unsure what to say. The reality of the scene weighed down on him like 1,000 stones. A mother, gone. A child, lost. And a home full of ghosts. He reached for his radio, his voice steady even though his heart wasn't. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need backup and medical at 221 Old Mill Road. Possible DOA, adult female, approximately mid-30s. Child present." Static crackled back. "Copy that, Unit 47. Backup en route." Daniel turned back to Lila. "How long has your mom been like this?" Lila shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know. She told me to go to school yesterday morning. When I came back, she was like this. I tried to wake her up, but she wouldn't move. I thought, maybe she was just tired." Daniel's throat tightened. "Why didn't you call anyone?" Her answer cut through him like a knife. "We don't have a phone. And, she always said not to talk to strangers. But then I saw you at the cafe, and she always said police were helpers. So I thought, maybe you'd help her." Daniel's chest ached. "You did the right thing, Lila. You did everything right." She nodded weakly, her small hand gripping his sleeve. "Can you help her now?" He wanted to say yes. He wanted to tell her everything would be okay. But there were no words that could fix what had already been broken. The next few hours passed in a blur of flashing lights and quiet murmurs. Paramedics confirmed what Daniel already knew. Lila's mother, identified as Sarah Miller, had died sometime the previous day. Likely from a combination of exhaustion and malnutrition. The kitchen downstairs had been nearly empty, a few cans of food, expired milk, and unpaid bills stacked high on the counter. Sarah had been struggling, there was no question. A single mother, working 2 jobs after her husband died 3 years earlier. The neighbors said they rarely saw her anymore, and when they did, she looked tired, thinner, like she was fading away piece by piece. Lila sat quietly on the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket far too big for her. She clutched the photo of her mother tightly, her eyes red but dry. She had no tears left. Daniel stood nearby, talking with the coroner when one of the younger officers approached. "Hey, boss, we found something." He held out a small shoebox. Inside were letters, dozens of them, addressed to Lila Miller, written in Sarah's neat handwriting. Daniel opened one carefully. It began, "Greater than my sweet girl, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay any longer. But I want you to remember one thing, you were my reason. Every day, every breath, every struggle, it was all for you. I'm sorry the world wasn't kinder. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more. But you are not alone. You never were. Someone will find you, and they'll see the light I see in you. Love always, Mom." Daniel had to look away. His eyes burned. When he turned back, Lila was watching him. "Did she write to me?" she asked softly. He nodded, kneeling beside her. "Yes, she did. She wanted you to know how much she loved you." Lila's lips quivered. "She always said we were okay, even when we weren't. She said we just had to hold on. But she couldn't anymore, could she?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Sometimes people get tired, Lila. But that doesn't mean they stop loving you." She leaned against him, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't want to go to sleep tonight. What if she's still waiting for me?" He took a slow breath, fighting to steady himself. "She's not waiting for you in that house anymore. She's at peace now, and I promise, you're not alone." Days turned into weeks. The story spread, first through the town, then across the state, and eventually around the world. People were moved not only by Sarah's tragedy but by Lila's courage. Donations poured in, strangers wrote letters, a local couple volunteered to foster her. For the first time in a long time, the world seemed to come together for someone who had almost been forgotten. Lila started school again. She smiled sometimes, though it never quite reached her eyes. But she was safe, and that mattered. She even began taking piano lessons through a charity program, her small fingers learning to find beauty where there had once been only silence. Daniel visited her often. He'd grown close to her in ways he hadn't expected. Maybe it was because he saw in her the same loss he'd once carried, the loss of someone who made the world feel safe. One evening, months later, he found her at the community center, sitting at a small piano, playing softly. The melody was slow, Tender, hauntingly beautiful. He stood in the doorway, listening. She looked up and smiled faintly. Mom used to hum this, she said. I remembered. Daniel nodded. It's beautiful. Do you think she can hear it? She asked. He took a moment before answering. I think she can feel it, wherever she is. Lila looked down at the keys. When I grow up, I want to help kids like me. So they don't have to be scared or hungry. So they don't have to lose their moms. He smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. I think that's exactly what she'd want. A year later, a foundation was established in Sarah Miller's name, the Lila's Light Foundation, to support single parents and children facing poverty. News outlets across the world covered the story. The girl who said, "Follow me home," inspired a global movement. People donated time, money, and resources. What had begun as one heartbreaking night had turned into hope for thousands. On the anniversary of her mother's passing, Lila stood with Daniel in front of the rebuilt farmhouse. The community had turned it into a shelter for women and children in crisis. The sign out front read, "Sarah's Place." It doesn't look sad anymore, Lila said softly. Daniel nodded. No, it looks alive. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded paper, one of her mother's letters. She placed it beneath the signpost. For her, she whispered. So she knows we kept going. Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. He had seen countless tragedies in his years as an officer, but none had ever changed him like this one. Because, sometimes, the smallest voices, the ones trembling in the rain, carry the greatest strength. As they turned to leave, Lila looked back one last time at the old house glowing with warm light through the windows. She smiled, a real smile this time. She said, "Follow me home," she murmured. I think I finally understand what she meant. Daniel frowned slightly. What do you think she meant, Lila? She looked up at him, eyes glistening but bright. She wanted someone to see us. To really see, not just the broken parts, but the love we had too. And now, the whole world saw. Daniel's heart swelled. He nodded slowly. Yeah, the whole world saw. That night, as he drove home under the starlit sky, Daniel thought about all the people who had reached out since that night, families offering help, children sending drawings, strangers writing letters of hope. The story of one small girl and her mother had rippled outward, touching hearts across oceans. And he realized something profound. Sometimes, the most powerful changes don't start with heroes or headlines. They start with a whisper. A plea. A frightened voice saying, "Follow me home." Months later, Lila performed her first piano recital. The hall was filled with people, friends, teachers, foster families, and police officers. Daniel sat in the front row, his hands clasped tightly. When she began to play, the room fell silent. The melody rose and fell like a heartbeat, full of sorrow and love intertwined. Halfway through, a tear slipped down Daniel's cheek. He wasn't the only one. By the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. When the final note faded, Lila stood and said softly into the microphone, "This is for my mom. She showed me the way home." The audience rose to their feet. Applause thundered through the hall, but Lila didn't cry this time. She simply smiled and looked up, as though listening to something only she could hear. And maybe she was, because somewhere, beyond the world of rain and pain and goodbyes, a woman with chestnut hair was smiling too, proud, peaceful, and finally free.